This is a familiar sound to many a person. Now listen to what changes if we remove the songs of birds who have seen significant population decline in the past 50 years. Without change, the next several decades could see the disappearance of these species in our world. Since 1970, it is estimated that 25% of birds have disappeared from the North American continent. This is an alarming statistic, given how many services birds provide to ecosystems around the world. The loss of biodiversity is intensifying ever more with the continued expansion of the human race. Humanity's impacts, by far and large, are unintentional. Nevertheless, our industrialized lives pose many challenges for the native bird populations. Domestic cats are one perfect example of this predicament. For thousands of years, humans have kept cats around since before the Iron Age. Feral cat populations pose a particularly large threat as they live solely outdoors. Feral cat populations can grow quickly into large colonies, and with an average cat estimated to hunt between 2 and 50 birds per year, their impacts are significant. Approximately 2.4 billion birds in the United States are killed each year by domestic cats. For some perspective, 2.4 billion is more than a quarter of the whole human population. There are several ways to combat this issue, each with potential benefits and concerns. Euthanization, or the killing of cats, is an option, but it is not very popular among most people given its seemingly cruel nature. Another option possible are trap, neuter, and release, or TNR programs. Castration is a non-lethal way of preventing further population growth, but the surgery costs money and veterinarians time. With such a large feral cat population in many places, it is not feasible to capture and neuter all feral cats. The simplest way any common person can help prevent bird mortality from cats is to simply keep your cats inside. Indoor cats can pose no threat to wild bird populations, which is a simple step towards positive change anyone can make. Our noise also harms our avian friends. In particular, roads and the environment immediately surrounding the road becomes uninhabitable for birds. Birds even have the ability to regenerate damaged hair cells, so they are constantly subject to the loud noises because their ears are always regenerating. Birds also typically have better hearing than humans do, especially in some species like owls, whose hearing is many times greater than ours, being able to detect the smallest movements of rodents and leaf litter. The man-made noise hinders their ability to hunt and is an unbearable constant sound on their ears. Noise pollution has been known to cause nest abandonment, at times even when chicks have not yet fledged. Other times, noise pollution can have some interesting effects. The yellow-rumped cacique is native to South and Central America. It is a bird that can mimic sounds it hears, similar to the Mimidae family that contains species like the mockingbird and catbird. They belong to the same order, Passeriformes. Caciques, rescued from a deforested area ravaged by logging in South America, are now located at the National Aquarium in Baltimore. These caciques have learned a special trait, however, the ability to mimic human machines. Sounds of chainsaws and bulldozer motors fill the air with noise, as well as the sound of radios the employees use to communicate. This ability does not harm the species, but it is a good example of a human practice directly influencing avian behavior. Roadways are, of course, not the only source of harmful noise. Other sources include things such as construction sites and airports. On the topic of airports, collision-related fatalities among bird species is a threat to many populations. Bird strikes are costly to humanity as well, and can be very dangerous to those aboard planes. Ground vehicles often strike birds that are either in the road or dart across it. Reduced speed limits in areas known to have a high concentration of birds is the simplest solution to this problem. Larger structures are much more of an issue though, particularly for migrating birds traveling at dusk or dawn. In a side-by-side comparison of night versus day, it is easy to see why birds would not see the wire strung out in front of them in a dark environment. The power lines blend in totally with the sea of dark behind them. Other large objects, such as communication tower guy wires and wind turbines, also contribute to these deaths. Wind turbines are sometimes given a bad rap. although the number of bird deaths attributed to them is much lower than other means of energy production, in particular oil. It is true, though, that many migratory birds collide with these structures and unfortunately do die because of broken wings or the fall. The largest contributor to these deaths is generally agreed to be windows, though. Birds have no reason to be accustomed to glass, and their eyes do not perceive it easily. Millions of birds die from flying full speed into windows, completely unaware that they are there. With more and more habitats being lost to urbanization, birds have few choices of where to go. Some species thrive in an urban environment and have adapted quite well to city life. Birds like the house sparrow, pigeons, European starlings, and many more now thrive in cities, finding homes in nooks and crannies of buildings, small bushes, or the small greenscapes available in parks. Over many generations, the effects of cohabitation with humans results in lower alert distances, flight initiation distances, and flight distances. Alert distance is the measurement of distance when a bird is alerted to a potential threat's presence. Flight initiation distance is the distance at which a bird takes flight from the potential threat, and flight distance is how far from the threat the bird will fly. These adaptations are not inherently a bad thing for those species, although it can leave them more vulnerable to attacks from predators. Alert distance and flight initiation distance become irrelevant at times, with species even approaching humans for food. Birds become so used to a human presence they behave like citizens, walking with humans through busy intersections and in massive crowds. Birds become increasingly reliant on humans for food, which creates an unhealthy level of reliance for a wild species. Food offered by humans is rarely as nutritionally diverse as what birds would normally forage for, including things like bread or other grain products. Poor diets could be disastrous to a population should a disease break out, as their immune systems will not be at full strength. Another side effect of living with humans is that birds will eat trash or use it as nesting material. Plastic is commonly found in bird nests in suburban and urban areas, and birds accidentally ingest plastic waste when foraging. This is a cardinal nest that contains plastic bag waste. Humans feeding birds can also artificially inflate the carrying capacity of a species, which poses more risk for disease spreading, fighting over territory, etc. This is not to say that feeding birds is a bad thing, though, as it provides birds an important supplementary food source if their normal supply is inadequate for reasons such as overcompetition or drought. Pesticides and genetically modified organisms, or GMOs, dominate the agricultural sector. They've allowed the human population to continually expand and provided food to billions around the world. However, they have a few downsides. They are extremely toxic to wildlife, including birds. Neonicotinoids are the most common insecticide used in the United States, and they are usually used to treat seeds before planting. Neonicotinoids are so toxic to birds that as little as a single corn kernel treated with the pesticides can kill a medium-sized songbird such as a warbler or finch. Fields treated with the pesticides grow crops with flesh toxic to birds, including the seeds and fruits produced. As many bird species rely on fruits and seeds to survive, the effects are widespread around agricultural regions and bird populations. Neonicotinoids cannot be detected by birds in such small quantities either, as they have no scent or taste in the plants. As little as 1/10 of a neonicotinoid-coated seed is enough to cause noticeable birth defects in the offspring of birds. These pesticides are endocrine disruptors in birds, and the baby chicks and fledgling young are the most impacted by their effects. Since they have a smaller body mass, the thermoregulatory system interruption caused by the chemicals can cause mortality in the young birds from a quick temperature shift. Another common birth defect is softened eggs. This effect was the subject of widespread national outcry when bald eagles were added to the endangered species list as a result of DDT use causing weakened eggshells. Eagles and other large birds of prey are often more affected due to biomagnification of toxins up through the food chain. Eggshells of birds that are exposed to pesticides can be very fragile and break prematurely, causing birth rates of the species to decrease significantly. Bird immune systems can also be weakened as a result of exposure to pesticides, which leaves species at risk of disease outbreaks causing high mortality rates. At least 113 pesticides used commonly are acknowledged to cause bird mortality, with millions dying from exposure to these toxins every year. Waterfowl are often more affected, as water systems surrounding pesticide-treated ground have pesticides leaching into them and runoff feeding them. When birds spend their whole day swimming in a toxin-filled body of water, the results are less than ideal. In total, pesticide use affects 87% of the world's threatened and endangered bird species. There is a bit of irony in the situation, as birds also act as natural pollinators and seed distributors for hundreds of ecosystems all around the world. By using pesticides to treat our crops, we are killing the very organisms designed to allow our crops to grow. More sustainable farming methods must be developed to avoid more damage caused to bird populations from widespread pesticide use. Traditional farming practices and crop rotation would be examples of this. Climate change is a very real problem, one that will test the future generations of both humanity and birds alike. Birds are losing their homes to deforestation, and habitat loss is a major contributor to avian mortality. As forests are chopped down, birds are left with the decision to find a new home in a different habitat or to try to cohabitate with humans. For some species, cohabitation is a plausible solution, as humans provide some helpful advantages for survival like food, water, and shelter. Eastern bluebirds were an endangered species in the 20th century, in large part due to habitat loss. However, with conservation efforts widespread, bluebird boxes put out by humans now provide the vitally important cavities that the species uses to nest. These would normally be found in dead tree trunks, but most dead trees are cut down by humans swiftly. Bluebirds are now off the endangered species list and are thriving once again. As the climate warms, bird ranges are shifting farther northward and up in elevation. There are several implications of this. Bird species will be forced to find new habitats, and often ones that are already inhabited by different species. This competition will likely result in conflict over resources in the region and potential failure in colonizing the new area. The rate at which plant, tree, and insect species will migrate to new habitats is much slower than the bird movement, which will result in phenotype plasticity, or the ability to adapt quickly, becoming a relevant topic in bird species. Adaptations will be necessary to survive, and species may go extinct if they cannot quickly adapt to new environments. National parks are expected to become more crucial in the survival of bird species as well, acting as some of the last wild frontiers for birds. As the climate warms, ranges will shift further north, and national parks in the northeast and northern Midwest regions are expected to have higher colonization rates than those in the southern and western regions. If current trends continue, a national park in the mid-21st century will have 29% more species in the winter months and 6% more species in the summer months. Wintering farther north is already becoming a more common occurrence, as the winters in some species' mating ranges are becoming more survivable as the climate warms. Phenotype plasticity is an important ability for an evolving climate. A bird species that shows this is the tawny owl. 50 years ago, a white morph of feather color was dominant in the cold winters of Finland. Over time, the color of their feathers has changed to the brown morph being more common on average, as the winters slowly become more mild. These microevolutions will most likely become critical to a bird species' survival in this changing world. Despite the grim statistics, lots of hope for the future should be shown. Success stories are all around us, and there are many different ways everyone can chip in to save their favorite songbirds. Put out birdhouses. Birdhouses provide important nesting sites for many species like bluebirds, wrens, chickadees, swallows, and many more. These boxes are especially important in suburban or urban regions where forests are sparse. Ensure that you wash your birdhouses out in late winter or early spring, as well as between broods. This ensures the bacteria, harmful parasites, and unwanted insects will not be able to harm your nesting birds. Do feed birds. Supplementary food is a great way to ensure that birds will not go hungry in winter, and as long as you are feeding them the correct food, it can do no harm. Food for humans like bread is frowned upon as it is not found in their normal diet, but seed-based foods or blends are great. Organic and GMO-free seeds are also available, which are much healthier for birds than pesticide-treated seeds. Suet feeders provide fats for the winter months. Fruit feeders can attract birds like Baltimore orioles. Hummingbird feeders provide sugar water that mimics nectar for hummingbirds, and putting out insects like mealworms can attract bluebirds and swallows to your home. Like birdhouses, it is important to clean your bird feeders at least every 3 weeks, as harmful fungi or bacteria can build up and transmit between the birds from the feeders. Place bird baths on your property. Water reflects rays of sun that can catch migrating birds' eyes, providing entertainment for you as well as an important resource for the birds. Finding clean and safe drinking water is important for all species of birds and is a helpful tool for attracting birds to your area. Ponds are also great sources of fresh water for birds. Rinsing out baths of any feathers, debris, or leaves every few days is a good idea to prevent spread of any pathogens between the birds, as well as breeding of mosquitoes. Native plant species are one of the best ways someone can easily support their local bird populations. Foreign or invasive species are very common in yards across the country, and the problem they pose is that the ecosystem does not have a purpose for them. Native plants attract insects, which lay their eggs on the plants, and the larvae repeat the life cycle. Many bird species rely on insects as a source of food, and non-native species often do not attract these insects. Native plants also attract pollinators, some of which are birds like hummingbirds. Native trees also provide homes for birds, and fruits that birds like cedar waxwings or orioles look for when choosing a nesting site. Another simple way to support birds is to cut grass less often. Instead of every week, trim grass every other week. Creating a brush pile with yard scraps, leaves, twigs, and grass clippings is another simple step toward creating a bird-friendly environment, as birds can use these materials for their nests or forage in them for food. Keeping native plant species instead of solely grass is another way anyone can help out. Some may call them weeds, but the truth is that these plant species are far more beneficial to birds than a single grass species is. A variety of species will attract pollinators, insects, spiders, and other beneficial bugs that act as food for the birds. Native species can also produce seeds that birds use as food. Not using pesticides on your lawn is a massive step towards sustainability with our environment. Learning to enjoy nature's natural beauty and processes can be a very rewarding endeavor for both you and your local bird populations. Leave dead trees. Dead trees are in most cases cut down quickly, which is bad news for birds that rely on them for food or nesting sites. Woodpeckers and other members of the Piccidae family of birds use dead trees as a source of food, pecking insects out of the bark and branches. This intense pecking leaves holes in the trunk, which birds like owls and bluebirds use as cavities for nesting. By leaving old tree trunks around, you provide both a food source and habitat for future generations of birds. Small window clings are another great way to prevent bird mortality. These window clings can be applied to a window or door that is often subject to bird collisions or is near bird feeders or houses. They are translucent from the inside, but are visible to birds on the outside and alert them to the presence of a glass surface. They are relatively inexpensive and easy to use as well, providing a simple fix to a significant problem. conservation success stories are abundant in modern times for birds. Take the bald eagle, for instance, which in the early 1970s had less than 500 mating pairs alive. With the banning of DDT nationwide and continuing monitoring of eagle pairs, the 2020s have seen eagle pair numbers surpass 70,000. Another bird species that has seen a rebound in number is the California condor. These scavenger birds are very similar to vultures, but due to hunting and lead poisoning from eating hunted animals, the species had decreased to less than 100 in the late 1970s. Quickly, the remaining individuals were held in captive breeding programs where they slowly gained in number, eventually being reintroduced into Southern California. Today, they number approximately 500, with the species slowly spreading back into its natural range. Looking to the future, there is hope that positive change will take place and that the success stories of species like the California condor will become widespread. In 50 years' time, birds can once again rebound with the cooperation of all of humankind, and that we can work together to restore this great earth we all call home to its true beauty the way it has been for billions of years.